Hi,
Hi, Nicola.
how are you?
I'm okay. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Rob, are you still on the call? Okay, I think it's just us.
Okay.
Sam, do you know how to? Oh, it says polling at the bottom. Okay, I think it's because I'm host now.
That is true.
I'm just trying to see what I need to do. Your presentation. Need to put that.
Don't worry, I can share from my screen, which is totally perfect. Yep. Great. So I've got both presentations ready. On the go. There we are. Perfect.
We wait.
In this case,
I think, are we all set up?
Yep, we are.
So let's wait a few minutes. Maybe we'll check in in 2 minutes, and then otherwise just give people another 5 minutes to join.
That sounds good. Totally good.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to wait another few minutes to see how many more people join. We'll probably get started at about 5 past. Okay, good afternoon, everybody, once again. Thank you for joining us for this first webinar of 3 that we will be holding this week. These are slightly different from our previous webinars, but we once again have Sam Otim, who presented the data-driven innovation webinar a few weeks ago, or a couple of months ago now. So Sam, I don't know if you want to take it away from here.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Nicola. Good evening, everybody. And just to pick up on what Nicola was saying, these particular webinars are a little different from the usual, more so because my interactions with a couple of you have led me to realize a couple of the concerns that you are raising, both directly and indirectly. So I thought I'd put together a couple of slides. I also looked through the IBM design course, the course on design thinking, And I thought I'll put together a couple of slides and talk a bit about innovating with the right mindset. And then I'll also do a second set of slides on designing for simplicity, because having interacted with some of you, I've had a chance to look at what you're working on, what you're putting together. And I thought that this would be beneficial in the grand scheme of things, not in the context of winning the competition, but because you're building products that are out to meet the mass market. I thought it would be helpful if I put together a couple of slides that will guide you on how you can make your product more successful, improve your chances of succeeding and appealing to the market or appealing to your audience. That is the gist of these particular webinars. So we call them mini series. They're going to be 3 days. That is going to be today, Wednesday, and I think the schedule was for Thursday or Friday. We'll verify that with FMT. That is the heart of it all. I hope everybody is clear on that one. Everyone can hear me loud and clear. And I am going to dive right in. I know I did an introduction the last time I did a webinar. So for those who haven't met me, or if you're meeting me for the very first time, let me do a very quick on who I am. My name is Otim Samuel. Nicola already talked about some of my background. I have a company, I am Ugandan, and I have a company in Uganda. It's called Trail Analytics Limited. We do a substantial amount of software development, data analysis, and so many other things. We work with various of the fintech companies within the country, a few telecoms, mostly commercial banks. And from my experience, I have picked up a couple of things along the way, which I love to share with lots of people. I have been mentoring a couple of you on this particular competition, and that's where I come from. And I think that's enough about me. Okay, let's get started. This particular set of slides is about innovating with the right mindset. And why I talk about mindset is because having interacted with those who I have worked with already, I've noticed certain concerns that come up along the way, both directly and indirectly. And so I packaged them into 3 distinctive quadrants, not actually quadrants, 3 distinctive sectors: perspective, fear, and strategy. Under perspective, I want to talk about how we view the world, how we approach innovation, what it is that drives us. Fear is another thing that I keep on picking up a lot on. It's mainly the fear of failure. And then the third one is strategy. How should you package your product and how should you move forward? How do you prepare your innovation? If you have a fresh idea, if you have a starting idea, if you're short on resources, if you win the competition, if you lose the competition, how should you proceed? And that's the gist of it. Why do I talk about mindset? Now, mindset is very strongly related to perspective because it's all about how you view the world. Those of you who paid attention to my last presentation, the last webinar that I ran, you notice that I love using lots of examples. And so in this particular case, I'm also going to use another set of examples because it makes things fairly simple to get across. So we have a story of a gentleman in Uganda, my country, and he's an old guy. This is not him. The picture on the screen is not him, but I picked this off Google just to get the point across. This guy was known for working extra hard, and that was to his credit. Among other things, he was a retailer. He had a small shop. Some people call it a duka, others call it a shop, whatever it is in your language. The whole point is he had a small retail outlet, and he grew that into a pretty powerful supermarket, not a supermarket chain, but a powerful supermarket. He was good at what he did. He basically knew all the suppliers, knew all the vendors, literally knew all his stuff. He was present day in, day out, opened the supermarket, closed it. Generally, he had everything at the tip of his fingertips. He was pretty good. Here's the thing. A couple of the supermarket vendors, or rather suppliers, got in touch with him and asked him, why don't you open other chains? Why don't you open other supermarkets? Reason being, we like working with you. And we definitely like to supply you. Right now, some of us are only supplying you about a ton of produce. We'd love to supply you something like 10 tons. But his answer was, how am I going to supervise multiple supermarkets? How am I going to supervise multiple outlets? His perspective was he needs to be present to do all of that. So the vendors told him, there's technology that can assist you in that one. You could hire people to run that. And his opinion was, I don't trust many of these newer technologies. I don't trust a lot of the people. And it was fundamentally a challenge to him. And needless to say, by the time he died, his supermarket didn't last very long. He tried training his kids to take over, but the story is supermarket shortly after he died collapsed. That is just one angle, because I picked out from that this gentleman had a particular dilemma that he was dealing with, and some of us innovators fall into the same. I say for a fact, I almost fell into the same myself, and it's something that many innovators sometimes fall into. Within the same context of mindset, another story is shared about a cow, well, actually a bull, sorry. In this context, it's a bull. But I've had this story in different variants. Sometimes it's a bull, other times it's a little elephant. The whole point is when the animal was so little, it was tethered to a tree as a calf. In this case, it's a bull, tethered to a tree as a calf, and it tried breaking away from the tether, but it couldn't. Reason being little, it didn't have the strength to break away. Later on, it kept on growing, got stronger, but by this time it had given up on trying to break away from the tether, even though they were still using essentially the same tether. Now, some people call that conditional formatting, whereby you are so used to a situation that you have grown up within that you do not believe you can get outside it. As a bull, it no longer endeavored, or it no longer attempted to break the tether. This got me thinking about a frame of mind in which this animal had been raised within. But at this point, I just like to throw out a question. And I am hoping my colleagues at FMT have the poll ready, because I'd love to throw this to you guys out there and say, what's the limiting factor in both these examples? Nicola, do we have the poll ready? Great. Okay, just answer question number one. In this case, we have both question 1 and 2 on the screen. So just go with question number 1. No worries. Just go with question number 1. What's the limiting factor in both these examples? I want to get your opinions. Tell me, is it technology? Is it a belief? Is it strength? Remember, the old man had dilemmas, expanding. The animal had limitations, attempting to break away. I think we can give ourselves approximately 1 minute. That shouldn't actually even take a minute. Tell me what your thoughts are. And after the minute, we will close the poll. My second question has been revealed, but we'll eventually get to that one. And well, it's within the context of fear. On the other hand, if it turns out you can't respond to the poll, let me see, if I were to give my answer on this poll, okay, I can't, as a panelist, I can't participate in the poll. But if you find that you're having difficulty submitting the poll because you're trying to answer only question 1 and it requires you to answer both question 1 and 2, just give me your answer on question 2. Don't be afraid, we can't see your identity when you give the second answer. I think. Okay. Namuntu Ndlovu says, we can't submit the answer. It needs us to answer both questions. Okay, here's what I want you to do. Answer both questions, and I will try and act like a supercomputer and remember the answers from both. So just give the answers to both questions. Have you ever been fired from a job? Yes, no, or I quit. In my case, you'd be surprised what my answer is. But give the answers to both and then submit it. I will use my super intelligence to remember what you provided. Okay, I think a minute is up.
Okay.
Let's see the results. Wonderful. Ooh, you guys are good. All right, answers to question number 1. What's the limiting factor in both examples? Technology, only 9%. 78% of you say a belief is the limiting factor. 13% say strength. My money is on a belief. I believe it's strongly a belief. That is the limiting factor. Technology is also correct for the old man. However, people only embrace technology when they believe technology can work for them. If they don't believe technology can work for them, it's hard for them to embrace it. Strength. there's an element of strength, but in the case of a bull, it's very difficult to tether a bull using the same rope you tethered it with when it was a calf. I'm not exactly much of a farmer, but that at least I have learned the hard way. About the beetle, have you ever been fired from a job? Lucky you guys. 78% of you have never been fired from a job. 13% quit. Okay, we're going to get to that eventually. Great. Let's move on to the second bit. This is, I like the fact that most of you agree with the analogy that a belief is generally what the limiting factor is for this situation. The old man didn't believe that he could supervise multiple outlets. And so in his mind, he saw himself reaching the upper limit of just having one outlet. And fundamentally, there is a saying that if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And this is attributed to an author called Wayne Dyer. The bull is tethered, and it believes that the upper limit of its strength is the tether. Surprisingly, the bull's master knows the truth of the bull's true strength. Otherwise, he wouldn't be tethering it to a yoke and using it to plow his fields. The point is, the bull in its mind only sees that as the upper limit. So for as long as it's attached to that tether, it holds to that. Other people, and this is especially from my experiences with the interactions I've had, in a competition, some people, winning represents the upper limit of achievement. They see winning as the ultimate. The whole point is losing is something that tears them apart. And sometimes we are so terrified of losing. The interesting angle is this: the organizers literally know there is more to the competition than winning. Take it from me, who has been through a couple of these competitions. I have witnessed what happens, and I have worked with different teams. It's amazing that a lot of the time, winning is just part of the cake. The rest of the cake is in the people that you meet at the competition, the people that you meet in the forums, the people you get introduced to, and the access that you gain. Sometimes even just the publicity that you attain is incredible. It is phenomenal. And I have seen that work tremendously for different companies that have taken a part in this. Many times it's probably because of the publicity that the whole event receives. Other times it's a matter of the people who attend, because many people who are interested in working with different innovators show up to many of the competitions just to sit in and listen. Given the situation that COVID has presented across the world, this might be a slightly different angle this time, but I just want you to keep in mind that for as long as you keep an open mindset, there is a lot that you can attain. Winning the competition is just a part of the cake, as I pointed out. And this leads me to one fundamental realization, and this was from listening to a couple of authors. One of them said, we actually see what we believe, not the other way around. We do not believe what we see. If I believe that the competition is going to benefit me fundamentally, and I am convinced in my heart that I am going out there, I'm going to meet a couple of people, this is just based on like what I've been talking about, then it's so much easier for me to approach it with that mindset as opposed to going in purely from the winning angle. Another time you begin to strongly see the point that we actually see what we believe is that if somebody tells you that, for instance, Sam, myself, I'm a nice guy, and you meet me and you're talking to me, it's so much easier to believe that I am a nice person simply because you've already been inculcated into that belief. Somebody has already told you that I'm a nice person. And because you've already believed that, you tend to see me as a nice person. Even though I'll probably use a couple of swear words, even if I'm not going to make you, I'm going to make you very, very angry. Let me give you an example. Think about people like the late Nelson Mandela, Billy Graham. These are icons of integrity. The world has spoken so positively about them, so highly about them. Today, when we meet them, or if we had a chance to meet them, many people meet them in awe, and they are happy to meet them, irrespective of what they say. And that's the whole point. It's because you've already been told that they are nice people. And granted, they are nice people. But when you meet them, you see them as that, because you have been pre-framed into that. The element of pre-framing, by the way, is a very strong marketing element that I will talk about, I think, in day 2 or day 3. So just stay tuned for that one. The reason I bring this up is because I also picked this up from another author who takes the same statement and says, whatever you believe with conviction ultimately becomes your reality. Mind you, everything I'm saying is because we need to get into the right mindset for the competition. We need to get into the right mindset on the way we are approaching our innovations, not just for the sake of the competition, but for the sake of growing and getting out our products out to the world. I'm bringing this up because I'm also aware that different countries have already begun some of the in-country competitions, and there's then going to be the final competition in June. And granted, I meant to say granted, some people are going to win, others will not win, or I'll say others will lose. The point is, when you lose, or if you lose, what happens? Is that the end of everything? Or do you carry on to the next level? And even if you win, what then? If you look at winning as just a stepping stone to the next level of your achievements, or the next level of your innovation, then that's a very nice angle to take it from. Now, what I'm really trying to point out here is that in the average competition, between 5 and 10% of the competitors win. The rest lose. What I've observed is that many people tend to end up playing it safe, or in other cases, do everything they can to win. And this has certain detrimental effects. And that is why I had brought up that question of, had you ever been fired from a job, which was really meant to talk about us dealing with our fears. I have found that in interacting with different members, there is that salient element of fear that seems to permeate everything that we do. We are aiming to play it safe sometimes, always aiming to win. And since I notice most of you have never been fired from your jobs, for the record, I have had the privilege, if I should say, of being fired from one of my jobs. And while I say that, it was a lesson to me because I picked up a number of things out of that experience. And later on, I kept to realize that many other people had also been fired from their jobs, which was not what I'd call the most exciting experience at the time. But many of us had lessons to take away from it. Now, why I'm bringing this up is purely because fear, in many cases, tends to cause us to play safe and actually hampers our ability to innovate. So much so that back in the past, in the 70s, and this I picked it up from another author, they said the ideal CEO's CV was evidence to the fact that they had never suffered any losses, they'd never been fired, and generally were very nice people. They'd been loved by all. This was the mantra of what you'd call a CEO in the 70s. However, when we come into the present day scenario, it is common to find that the average CEO and sometimes the best CEOs know how to handle losses, or at least they've had some kind of experience with losses. They've literally been to the gates of hell and back. That means they have worked with the toughest bosses, they've worked with the toughest clients and so on. And they also understand that being liked by everybody is just one way to do things. The reality of life is there'll always be somebody that doesn't like you. And there'll be a lot of people that like you. You have to learn to draw the line in the sand and say you're either for them or for us. There's no money in between. And this, by the way, is another marketing tactic whereby you understand who your audience is and you go out looking for your audience. The reason I'm bringing this up is because fear sometimes becomes a guiding factor for the way we do things, and it becomes a very dangerous master, especially if you're a slave to fear. Take a few examples of what fear can actually do to a company. Many of us know about Kodak, which is pretty much what you'd call the poster child for many of the bad examples, especially in terms of innovation. Kodak's former vice president, Don Strickland, said, "We developed the world's first consumer digital camera, but we could not get approval to launch or sell it because of fear of the effects on the film market." Today, how many people are still using film? That's just an interesting scenario to go by, and it tells you what fear can do if you're not ready to embrace what we call innovation. Now, if you're an innovator, which is what literally everybody listening in is, then fear should not be one of your masters. So the question becomes, granted, we face fear. Fear is in our lives. We always encounter it, and standing in front of, let's say, 100 people to do a pitch is definitely going to terrify us. How then should we deal with fear? Mark Twain has an opinion. He says, do the thing you fear the most, and the death of fear is bound to happen. I find this a very interesting statement because, for instance, guys who are afraid to approach girls, sorry to use this example, but we're talking about life as well as data science, so I can bring up that as on the basis of the number of statistics out there. Guys who are afraid to approach girls, if you throw that guy in a room with, let's say, 10 ladies, and force him to talk to them, he could do one of two things. One, fold into a corner, or two, get out there and actually find a way to combat his fears. Do the thing you fear the most, and the death of fear is certain. The second example would be, the second opinion is from yours truly, Robert Kiyosaki, the author of the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. He says, winners are not afraid of losing, but losers are. Failure is part of the process of success, which is a statement I would like you to take to heart. That people who avoid failure also end up avoiding success. One of the authors I was listening to pointed out that he had a chance to interview, I think it was Rockefeller, and he asked him, what is the one way you can improve your level of success? And Rockefeller's answer was, double your failure rate. Meaning, embrace failure, it happens, you will apply for jobs, you will submit proposals. I run a company, I can tell you for a fact, I've lost track of how many proposals I've submitted. But do I stop doing it? I keep doing it. I'm invited several times to explain a concept, bid on a project, and many times I'm told you were not successful. But what I stopped doing is being afraid of the prospect of losing. Why? Because I know it's a part of life, it happens. Everybody has a certain failure rate. Instead, what I'm interested in is, why did I lose? I could actually tell you the reason why I was fired, because it's something that I learned from. In this case, I also now ask, why exactly did I lose? Where did I fail? Reason being, I want to find out from that. And if they're courteous enough to provide that information, I'm much, much happier. Think of the lions, the king of the jungle. The average lion has a failure rate in terms of hunting. It gets 1 in about 10 kills. 1 in 10 hunting attempts actually results in a successful kill. That just tells you something about it, but lions are nowhere on the verge of being extinct. They are still alive. And if you learn from defeat, which is what I embrace nowadays, meaning if I fail to win something, I tell myself, you really haven't lost. This is a quote from Zig Ziglar. These are just a couple of opinions. Now, as I was reading another book, I came across a very interesting statement. This is a gentleman called Antonio Garcia. He wrote a book, Chaos Monkeys, because Antonio had worked with Facebook. He actually built an app that was bought by Twitter. He's from the US Silicon Valley. So he built an app that was bought by Twitter. He ended up being hired by Facebook. And while he worked with Facebook, he came across certain very interesting or phenomenal realizations. And these are things that could benefit many innovators. So I threw this out there. I said, businesses do not typically die from launching a new product or feature, but they die from fearing to, and hence failing to launch new products or features. So one thing I keep on picking up on is, as I interact with different innovators, I keep noticing that there's certain concern. Some of them are afraid to try something because it might end up this way. And I usually tell them, guys, don't be afraid. Give it a try and find out. Learn from the data. Do it, see the results, catalog that. That becomes part of the data that is going to lead your decision making. Ultimately, you won't going to have any data if you don't try it. And that's the only way to succeed. An interesting fact about fear, and this is just something as we try and wrap up this whole concept of fear, is that as human beings, as babies, we are born with 2 primordial fears. Number 1, the fear of failing, or rather, the fear of falling, fear of falling, and the fear of loud noises. All other fears are simply learned. Now that's interesting because literally, naturally, we only have 2 fundamental fears. But every other fear in life, the fear of standing in front of people, the fear of approaching new people, the fear of going to a foreign country, the fear of going anywhere or doing something new, getting out of job security, all those fears are basically learned because we have seen a couple of bad examples about them, or probably we have some unfounded assumptions about them. Having spoken about fear, and by the way, I'm not saying what I'm telling you is going to solve all your problems on fear. I just want you to adopt a fresh perspective to fear. Embrace certain realities about it and know that there are ways to curb this. Reason being, I've walked this path, I've been down that road, and it's not really the most pleasant experience, but the more I do something, well, the better things become. How then do you tailor your strategy, especially as you prepare your innovations and move to the next level? Interestingly about us human beings is that we are influenced a lot by what we listen to. I started by giving an example about the lions, and I said, lions will make 1 in 10 kills, especially when they attempt a hunt. So if they go for 10 hunts, they're going to have 1 hunt as successful, but that is just as an individual lion. By the way, I'm borrowing from statistics that I seem to remember from National Geographic. If I am off the mark, if it's actually 1 in 13, bear with me. However, if the lion alters its strategy and hunts as a pack, suddenly the success ratio goes up. It's no longer 1 in 3, or rather, it's no longer 1 in 10, it becomes 1 in 6 hunting attempts actually yields a successful kill. For us human beings, we tend to be influenced a lot by what we listen to. And that sometimes determines how we approach life. And it also determines our strategies towards life. Surprisingly, our thoughts are generally influenced by a lot about what we listen to. And I know this for a fact because I personally used to listen to a substantial amount of radio. Once in a while, I still do. Or later, I've kind of given up on it. Now, in Uganda, we have a popular radio station, plays pretty much my kind of music, which is generally R&B and hip hop. And every time I found I was listening to that radio station, it didn't surprise me, but my thought process became, where's the party at? Those are the questions on my mind. Why are taxes so high? And why are people so weird? This is just actually what I was thinking about. Now, when I say, where's the party at? Because these guys are talking about R. Kelly is coming to town. Does R. Kelly still do music? I don't know. It's, I think, Conscience or someone like that. But generally, we're talking about where the party is at. This kind of show is going down. And then they're announcing government is going to read out the new budget. And for the last decade, I think taxes have always been going up. That seemed to be the case. Then the next thing I find at the top of the hour, there is some news release and somebody has died, somebody's been arrested, a landslide has happened, and I'm thinking, gosh, this seems to be the world we live in. And my thought processes began to revolve around this. Now, that's not a very pleasant situation to be in. So I said, okay, let's turn the tables around. At my last webinar, I talked about this gentleman, Chris Voss, and I also came across a book by Strive Masiyiwa, one of Africa's greatest. Having read those books and having listened to all these authors, I suddenly realized that my mindset had changed, had shifted from where's the party at to what are the facts about the story? Suddenly, if I find out that fuel prices are going up, I'm more intrigued by what the facts are. The last time we had fuel prices going up, I had lots of questions, especially about people who were dealing in the fuel company, in the fuel business, because I said, world prices seem to be dropping, but why is that in Africa? The prices seem to have held steady. Actually, in Uganda, per se, the prices seem to have held steady. They haven't dropped commensurately. And I was so curious about what the facts were. I wasn't complaining about the method. I was just intrigued by the facts. Why? When Chris Voss talked about people being kidnapped, he dug into the facts. He began pulling data out. And suddenly I found my style of approach is being influenced by the people I'm listening to. Strive Masiyiwa talks about the ability to obtain a startup grant for your business. And if you lose out at the competition, the one being organized right now, the one in which we are, it turns out you still have opportunities to obtain startup grants. And I was thinking to myself, so it's actually possible to obtain these. And then suddenly when everybody is talking about what COVID is doing and the mess it's causing, I'm thinking, why am I even listening to talk about people who say they have COVID drugs? And yet this is unproven. In Uganda, we've heard all sorts of rumors about that. But suddenly you notice my style of thinking begins to evolve based on who I am listening to, based on the audience that I am keeping. Now, let's get a little practical. You want to influence your style of thinking. You want to become a better person. You want to change your frame of mind. You want to basically have a competitive advantage. Here's a few tricks on how I did it. You could borrow the same, by the way, lots of things to learn out there, but I'm going to try and make this quick. I'm already done with about 35 minutes. Step one, if you want to influence your style of thinking, if you want to improve your style of thinking, first thing you do is go to YouTube and search for an author such as Brian Tracy. You notice I've been talking about lots of authors, Wayne Dyer, Chris Voss, Strive Masiyiwa. Search for any of them. I'm just using Brian Tracy as an example. Because Brian Tracy is such an accomplished public speaker, he has lots of audiobooks out there. And once you've searched for him, select any of his audiobooks. My personal preference is audiobooks longer than 30 minutes. By the way, if you're worried, I am going to put all of this into a PDF, or what I call a cheat sheet, which I will circulate to FinMark, and then they will distribute to basically all of us. So pick out any of his audiobooks longer than 30 minutes. Like I said, 30 minutes is just a preference. You could go for the 5-minute one, but I love 30 minutes because later on I can listen to that one, and there's a lot of substance in that. After I have identified one of the audiobooks, I'll go to Google and search for download videos from YouTube. Now, Google has lots of sites which apparently are legal and valid that allow you to download videos from YouTube. The reason you're looking for these sites is because when you pick the link from YouTube and paste it into these sites, Google will guide you on, the websites will guide you on how to download the substance from YouTube. The next step is generally to download the audio version. Now, just because it's a video on YouTube, many of the sites that Google will give you, typically the first 3 sites that Google will give you, will allow you to download the audio equivalent or the video option from YouTube, meaning you can download the file both ways, video, audio, pick one. But I personally prefer the audio. Reason being, if Brian Tracy is talking about how to manage your goals, there's no point in watching that. I can play it back on my headphones and listen to it. I can play it back in the car, I can play it back on my phone, whichever. So download and listen to. Now, the reason I started by saying go to YouTube is because YouTube will eventually give you similar authors. And you can then borrow from those authors. Once you started with Brian Tracy, you can pick up another author. And that is how suddenly I seem to be spilling out all these different authors. Brian Tracy, Wayne Dyer, Strive Masiwa, all of them I picked up because I picked on one. And YouTube eventually kept on making other recommendations, and eventually I kept on discovering so many others. But what even gets interesting is that each of these authors quotes from another. And so you keep learning about who else is talking about this material. So like I said, I'll prepare a cheat sheet on all of this. But the reason you want to influence yourself or change your frame of thinking so as to improve your competitive advantage in the market is because it all starts with a thought. Sow a thought, you reap an act. When you sow an act, you reap a habit. When you sow a habit, you reap a character. And guess what? Sow a character, you reap a destiny. And the destiny is what all of us are aiming for. This, by the way, is a quote attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of the all-time greatest. Let me crown this session by talking about this genius over here called Eric Riers, the lean startup. If there's anything you can take away from this talk, it's to master the strategy of working lean, especially when you're innovating in the technology space, be it in whether you're building a VSLA app, that is a village savings app for women in the rural areas, whether you're building a water saving solution but you're using an element of technology. Eric Riers talks about starting lean. And the best way to appreciate starting lean is to tell you of a time I failed to start lean. Like I pointed out, I've had my fair share of failures and experiences. I was once contracted to build a professional networking system. And this was several years ago, long before I had figured all of this out. And the client was very keen on having lots of functionality. He wanted multiple user types, administrative management, advert management, group forums, task scheduling. Gosh, the list was literally endless. And I fell into this. I didn't know how to manage the process, and suffice to say, the site is non-functional today. It doesn't exist. We spent a lot of time putting all this together, and if there's one thing I take away from this, it taught me how not to innovate. In day 2, I'll talk more about how you should actually proceed with this. Actually, in the next slide, I'll talk a bit about this as well. What I should have done is, following the lean methodology by Eric Riers, is 1, ask the question, do people want this product? Now, these are questions as an innovator you can ask yourself. Do people want this product? What type of users, what type of user types should we provide functionality for, just to test whether people want this product? This is something Eric Riers calls validated learning. You do something, you see the reaction from the populace or from the users, and based on that, you learn a thing or two. Then I can build the basic networking capabilities. After all, it's a professional networking system. But based on just a handful of users, namely probably the buyer and the seller. We do not need advert management at this stage. We do not need so many other fancy functionality within the system. And that just allows you to get started. Once you have done that one, you then evaluate, are people willing to pay for this? Meaning you come up with a couple of things like upsells. An upsell is where I add extra functionality and I say, if you'd like extra functionality, like if you'd like to promote your post, if you'd like to be listed at the top of the list of people who would be actually professional networks, you can subscribe or you can pay for this. And if anyone pays, people actually see value in this. I have sold a product to them, and guess what? They are embracing that product. This would be a fundamental strategy. I can't, because I'm limited by the amount of time that we have, I can't go deeper into the whole lean methodology, but that is one strategy that you can embrace. And many times when I look at the different products you have and the different innovations, I'll think to myself, does it seem like we're trying to chew too much? Are we trying to take on way too much? And that was just one of the fundamental questions in my mind. This wraps up the first presentation about adapting our frame of mind, how we see the world, how we see things. We started off by talking about the perspective. You need to make sure you're looking at things the right way. What you believe is what you see, not the other way around. The second one is managing to rein in our fears. Do the thing you fear the most, and the death of fear is certain. The third is adapting our strategies. When you have all of this in check, you want to coexist somewhere at this sweet spot where you have a fair balance of fear, a fair balance of perspective, and a whole lot of strategy. Now, I'd love to jump onto the second set of slides. I just want to check if there are questions. If there are no questions at this point, what I'll suggest we do, because I am already 45 minutes. We're already 45 minutes in. So I want to jump into the second slide and take you through this very, very, very quickly. And then we can have the questions at the end. Why I talk about defining your concept. And please bear with me, don't get exhausted. We will be done in a short while. I'm going to run through this one. When we talk about defining your concept, one of the most important bits is coming up with a clear design and making your message clear to the world. I have read a couple of messages that, I read a couple of descriptions of the innovations, and I keep thinking some of them are really to the point. Others leave me wondering, what is being developed? What exactly, who are you targeting in the first case? And many times I also ask myself, who's the audience in this context? So the second bit that we shall talk about is keeping it simple. When you understand your audience, it's so much easier to keep a lot about what you're trying to get across to them. Very, very simple. People love simplicity. And even though human beings claim we are intelligent, we have very advanced brains, surprise, surprise, we actually like very simple things. Finally, I'll talk about some of the tools of the trade. Many times when I've been giving these talks, I've been asked, what tools do you use to get your message across? One of the tools I'm using right now is PowerPoint. But there are lots of other tools and there's so many other options in the market. So let's run through this and I see if I can close this in approximately 15 minutes. That would have made a total of about 1 hour, and we can have a couple of questions and then we're done. Sample one. I found this within the write-up of the different innovations, and I thought this was well done. But we all know that the enemy of the good, or rather the enemy of the best, is the good. And so I thought about this and I said, maybe we could discuss this as a whole. I could throw this out to you guys and say, tell me what you think. This particular sample says we're currently developing a central payment point that will give users the power for E and M commerce. When I read this, I thought to myself, this could be improved, even though this gives me a picture of what the innovator is working on. Which leads me to my one question. I have again 2 questions in this particular presentation. So I'm going to ask Nicola, you're still there, I believe? You can help me with the poll? Wonderful. In your opinion, and this is to all of us who are attending this, this is the sample. We're currently developing a central payment point that will give users the power for E and M commerce. Who would you say is the target audience in this case? Nicola, if you don't mind, just throw this poll up. This time, I hope it is 1 poll.
It's going to come up with 2 again, but...
No worries. Let's answer both. I will wing it. All right. Sure. So here's what I want you to do. Give me the answer to both these questions. The second question, I'm just going to ask you to take a wild guess. I would have given you the answer, but give me your answers and I am going to carry forward with the discussion after this. So let's just take about a minute And I love some of the questions that are already being drafted into the Q&A. We are going to get to these ones eventually. So who is the target audience? Let me go back a little so that you can see the question, or rather you can see the description. We're currently developing a central payment point that will give users the power for E and M commerce. Who is the target audience? I think what I can do is I can jump to the next one and I'll show you the question. This I just have to be, okay. This will be the next question so that you can also answer. The next question is, so that you answer both. The website will facilitate the creation of professional networks based on transitive trust, exchange of ideas, and provision of services. So tell me which answer. That's for question number 2. Who's the target audience? And for question number 2, if any of you gets it right, if ever you're in Uganda, give me a call, buy you a round of drinks. Okay, so let's take ourselves about a minute and put in the answers to this. Ten more seconds. I know my style of counting down on minutes is a little uncouth, but 3, 2, 1. All right. I think we can close the poll at this stage. Great. Nice. Nice. Now let me point something out. Thank you all for the responses. The first thing that gets my attention is that the answers to question 1 are pretty much spread out, even though it looks like 54% of you say online merchants or payment aggregators. 29% think it's online retailers, and there's a 4% that are not certain. The second one, many of you have managed to pick out professionals, service providers, and a substantial number say it's actually hard to say, which is what I was expecting. Going back to question number 1. So let's just go back to question number 1. This is back here. Okay. All right, I think we can close this. Question 1. We're currently developing a central payment point that will give users the power for E and M commerce. Many of you went for payment aggregators, that is online merchants, payment aggregators. Others said online retailers. That means there is a fair balance. For the record, these two are fundamentally different types of users. Online retailers, these are basically the consumers of the service. Online merchants, these are the likes of PayPal, Stripe, and any other mobile money aggregator. Those who connect to the telcos and allow you to do mobile money payments. In Uganda, we have a couple of those companies. You may have heard of True African, Yo Uganda Limited. These are the companies that do payment aggregation. They facilitate an electronic system that moves money from one point to another. Those are a very different type of person. And that's why I say they are in the same category as the likes of PayPal, Stripe, and so many others. While online retailers are what we call people who have online stores. Anyone who has a store on Shopify, eBay, and the likes, those are the online retailers. In my mind, I would have actually expected, and this is just to show you how a failure to be clear on the audience can disassociate or disorganize anybody who's reading your, what I call your description, your project description, or your innovation description or innovation summary. How it can disorganize them fundamentally is if there is that lack of clarity. And here it says we're developing a central payment point that will give users the power for E and M commerce. Users, in my case, is the keyword. It seems as if the users are the target. And I would have said users are the online retailers. Notice how we have different opinions to this. This is not meant to tell you that this is the solid, this is the gospel truth. This, if I were a panel, if I were a judge on the panel, these are some of the questions I'll probably be asking and say, who exactly is the audience in this case? But notice how the majority of the non-judges would have the opinion that it seems as if the target is the online merchants. The failure to define the audience can throw you off balance, especially when you start doing a marketing campaign. Trust me on this one. I have seen it happen. It happens a lot. It still happens, and it will continue to happen. That is why I'm bringing this up, just so that you can take a leaf out of this. How do you help yourself identify the audience? How do you help yourself narrow down on the audience? Number one, take out certain keywords from your description. Here it says central payment point. I would say to myself, what would my audience look out for if they were searching for me on Google? So I went to Google and I searched out the words central payment, because I was looking at that as one of the keywords they would use. And it turns out there is nothing for central payment point, but there is central payment systems. Now that gets me wondering, should I change central payment point to central payment systems? Notice the direction I'm taking. I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just saying, if I were approaching this, I would want to use words that my audience will resonate with. Because chances are when my audience comes to Google and starts searching for me, there's a high likelihood they're going to use central payment systems, not central payment point. That's just something to keep in mind. The second bit is when you say Ian M. Commerce, I can't help but wonder, are we talking about mobile or electronic? And if we're talking about them, most of them are payment systems. Why the distinction anyway? But more importantly, if I was a judge on the panel, one of the questions I would be asking is, how exactly do you intend to do this? Because I know credit card payment processing is fundamentally different from mobile money payment processing. Are you trying to hit both, or are you trying to focus on one? Considering we're in Africa, or sub-Saharan Africa for that matter, it turns out that mobile money seems to have greater penetration than credit card payments. Of course, in a couple of countries, that statistic doesn't entirely hold true, but for the bulk of Africa, it does. Which would lead me to question, how exactly are you hoping for your solution to have impact? For the record, let me bring up something that Rob shared. And I was looking through it. This is the document on the judging criteria. And as I was looking through it, it got me thinking, there are things about potential impact of the solution, which apparently weighs 30%. When we talk about potential impact of the solution, if a solution like this is focusing on credit card payments, yet the bulk of Africa is mobile money payments, then that compromising your ability to have significant impact? That's just a question, and that's, by the way, something that we can chew on. The alternative, and this is as I was thinking about it, and mind you, the alternative is not meant to say this is how it should be changed or this is the perfect answer. This is just to tell you that depending on your audience, you usually have to draft a very different message for them. Bear in mind that one of our audience is going to be the judges, but later on another audience is going to be the public. If I was selling something like this to the public, not the judges, I would think of saying, are you selling your items online? Having trouble receiving payments? We're putting in place a solution for you. In my mind, this would resonate with certain members of the audience. It doesn't mean it's going to answer everybody's problem. A statement like that could appear on your landing page, seeing as most of us are doing electronic solutions. It could appear on your landing page for your website. And this, at least, I have seen on many websites whereby people ask questions and the human mind tends to connect or convert strongly when a question is presented because an answer is required inevitably. This leads me to sample 2, which we have already talked about, but let me talk a bit about sample 2. Here it says the website will facilitate the creation of professional networks based on transitive trust, exchange of ideas, and provision of services. The very first time this presentation was made to me, this particular description of the professional networking system, this is the one I talked about earlier. The very first time this was presented to me, I literally spaced out because I just didn't know what are we focusing on. There seems to be approximately 3 different types of users here. There's the early adopters, there's a tech-savvy crowd, there are the professionals, but when we start talking of provisional services, this is service providers. What kind of services? That means they're buyers and they're sellers. Whenever you have services being exchanged, you have 2 different players. Somebody who demands the service, somebody who provides the service. So the question is, how are we bringing them together? And suddenly I had all these questions. Now, I'm glad that many of you provided some thoughts on these. I noticed many of you, I think we're leaning towards the professionals. Forgive me in case my mind is a little scattered on that one. But I ultimately ended up leaning more towards hard to say. But I'm glad you guys are a lot more intelligent than me, so you definitely had a particular opinion to go for. One of the alternatives one could go with for the second sample, despite it being as generic or as distributed as it was, is an eBay for professional services. I've found that many times when describing a product, likening it to an existing product that many people already know makes it easier for most people to understand. That's where you hear Airbnb for private jets, Uber for private jets. And it just gets very interesting. You hear all sorts of things, Uber for this, that. The point is, it makes it easier for the audience to resonate with and ultimately work with. My hope is that if you can borrow a bit of these leaves, it should make things a little easier. How do we then get into the audience's mind? Because as you define or understand your audience, you need to get into their minds. Step one, what would my audience search for? These are questions you need to be asking yourself. Because how you present your innovation to the world, or even to the judges could very well become part of your audience. They could become part of your ultimate users. But you have to ask yourself, what will people search for? I was reading a book by a gentleman called Jim Edwards. It's Copywriting Secrets. And he said he at one point prepared material. He prepared actually a book for what you call the unfit people, people who called themselves couch potatoes. And to market it to them, he had to use the word couch potatoes somewhere in the marketing, that is in the copy. What we call copywriting is really just a fancy word, a glorified term for writing material or writing information. The moment he used couch potatoes, many of the audience resonated with that strongly, and he was able to have higher conversions, get greater sales. That's just one trick to marketing, which is something we're going to talk about later on. That is in day number 2 as well as day number 3. What kind of words do they use when talking? I already used the phrase couch potatoes. That is one word. There are certain words that, for instance, a person like me will understand very strongly if you use them. But couch potatoes is just one classic example. How should I present my product to them? And this is what's going to lead us into the next slide. How we present. We need to embrace the concept of simplicity. Sometimes as human beings, we love to try and complicate things, yet they should really be very simple. Why I say simplicity is because I've observed many of the products being developed, and I've had a chance to critique many services out there. And here are a couple of the common mistakes I have come across, which many of us could learn from. Mind you, what I'm showing on the screen is not one of the common mistakes that we make, but rather it's not one of the systems being developed by any of the innovators. But I just thought to myself, this is something I've encountered on the internet. I happily took a screenshot of it. Trying to fit in too much. Sometimes we are tempted to pack so much information in the hope that people are going to sit down and actually read through this. Reality check, that doesn't happen. People are in a hurry, and nowadays the attention span by the average person is so much thinner. Secondly, inappropriate color scheme. Now you might say to me, I am not a designer, I am not an artist, so I have no idea on how to come up with a color scheme. Well, there's a solution to that. Go to Google Images, type out the word color scheme, and it's going to give you lots of ideas. Go to color balance, or go to color schemes that go with brown. If you want your product to have a brown theme, pick up on color themes that go with brown. You could even say app color schemes or website color schemes. The whole point is you're just borrowing from lots of words out there. Today, a lot of style sheets, you hear talk about Bootstrap. It's all available on the internet. Borrow from it, pick it up and adopt it. You can work with it very easily. And so you don't really have to be a designer. I mean, the fact is, you may not be a designer, but you can definitely tell something that doesn't look good. Here's another example. Another mistake. Trying to compete with scam sites. This particular website is not a scam site, but it looks very much like a scam site. And I have encountered scam sites before. Sometime back, I came onto Facebook. I found an advert, clicked on it. It took me to a site, and immediately I had all these red flags in my head telling me this is a scam site. I went to Google, search it up, and indeed it was a scam site. Unfortunately, I tried looking for it recently. The website had been taken down. The point is, a scam site usually looks weird. Now, today's scam sites also have some really neat interfaces. It ultimately comes down to you paying them, and then you don't get your money back. But this is just an example of a scam site. Secondly, failure to maintain balance. This is not an example of a scam site, but this could be what a scam site could look like. You look at it and you definitely get uncomfortable. The second one is failure to maintain balance. What is balance? The red line I've just drawn on the screen, this is balance. Notice this image. does not align with this asset down here. This line really needs to be over there, because psychologically, our minds are looking out for that. When you look at a car, it is balanced. The tires are all in alignment. You do not have one tire out of alignment with the other. That's why sometimes they even call it wheel balancing. The point is, we need to maintain an element of balance within our designs. And there are so many products out there, so many style sheets that are publicly available that we can use to achieve balance. Here's an example of something that has a greater degree of balance. This is a style sheet that is adopted from the internet. So I didn't even have to do anything too fancy. Just pulled up a couple of pieces, patched them together, and boom, we had this. Mind you, this is actually a concept, so the actual solution hadn't been implemented, but I borrowed a lot from initial prototypes, and there we had it. And that just gives you something that looks a little more balanced, because when you look at this, you get a sense for achievement, or what I would call relative balance within what your interfaces should look like. So let's talk a bit more about design. These are things that I think you could benefit from. Here are a couple of cheats that I came across. There's an artist, there's an author called Otim Samuel, and he says originality is plagiarism undetected. This by far is the most controversial statement I am hoping I will make throughout this webinar, but he goes on to point out that people today obsess over being original, which is fundamentally a flaw. We ought to focus on delivering a product. And even if somebody notices that your interface has a close similarity with another existing interface, no problem. The whole point is, what are you presenting to them? Does it look neat? Does it look acceptable? Do not go all out and suddenly replicate another person's interface. Obviously, if you pick up the whole Facebook interface, everybody will know. But come up with a few modifications. And this is something that you see even in the movies today. Somebody comes up with one concept, but he has borrowed heavily from another. I did not realize that until this very same author pointed out a couple of movies. And later on, I realized that, hello, a series like The Game of Thrones, the characters called the Dothraki are actually a spin-off from Lord of the Rings, Rohirrim, the people of Rohan, the Horse Lords. And I was thinking, wow. And it turns out the author of Game of Thrones borrowed quite a bit from Lord of the Rings. And I thought that's pretty creative, but I would never have noticed that. But he simply said, when you borrow from one, do not borrow the colors, do not borrow the entire layout, borrow the vision behind it. So why I'm talking about borrowing from the internet is because I want you to go online with a renewed mindset, and don't be afraid to inherit what others have been doing, but make modifications, add your personal touch to it. Do not borrow the colors, the layout, the everything. Simply make amendments, learn from it, look at the world through the lens that they were looking at it, and come up with your own concept. This is one of the first design sheets that I thought would be helpful. Secondly, keep in mind, you can't impress everyone. But one thing for sure is, you can appeal to the majority of your target audience. Bear in mind that your audience could be very, very different at different points in time. Right now, one of your audiences is going to be the judges. For those of you that have probably made it to the next level, or those of you whose countries have not yet done what you call the country pitching finals or competitions. However, after the judges, you also have the world to sell your product to. And within the world, incidentally, it's a different audience when you're dealing with men below a certain age and men above a certain age. You might also be appealing to, let's say, football fans. And then another time you're trying to sell your product to farmers. You need to package your product appropriately so that each of them feels like you are speaking to them. Well, I was reading a book by one gentleman, Russell Brunson, .com Secrets. He said, be careful when you're even selling pet food. If you come up with an innovation that helps people sell pet food, incidentally, selling pet food to cat owners is very different from selling pet food to dog owners, because apparently kittens need a different type of attention from puppies. That should get the message across. The other issue about design is your product's appearance should tell its story. Just looking at what's on the screen, this is definitely not a car sales website. That bit should be fairly clear. It is most likely, at least what our minds see the moment we see all the graphs on this screen, tells us this is most likely some kind of analytical system or some kind of data mining system The whole point is its appearance tells the story. If the colors were red, it would also say something else. But the whole point is I have visited some of the innovations, looked at them and thought to myself, what exactly are you doing? Is this the correct site? Because first of all, what you've told me doesn't seem to align with what I am seeing. Next sheet, learn the power of fonts and their combinations. If I ever came across the stop sign on the right, I would think to myself, the mayor of this city is pretty funky, but I'm not sure I'll take it seriously. Why? Because my mind has been inculcated to respond to the stop sign on the left. However, if I found you using this kind of color combination and fonts on your website, I'm probably going to pause and wonder, should I actually click any link on this website? You get the concept? Fonts tend to speak. The same applies to colors. We need to learn that balance. Like I said, even if you're not a designer, you can borrow a lot from what's out there. Do not be afraid to go out there and borrow. That's why I started by talking about the mindset, because we need to change our minds, get out there, and borrow from what's going on. All right. Next design sheet. When you find yourself stuck, borrow from nature. Nature has lots of answers. Many of us feel at peace when we see lots of green. You think of a golf course as a lovely, relaxing experience. There's lots of green in the golf course. When you think of a red sign is probably commensurate with blood. And whenever we see blood spilling out of the body, our first reaction is not to say, oh, everything is okay. Usually you think something's wrong. So definitely keep in mind that the colors sometimes tell us how we should approach things. Other color balances like blue, if you do a bit of research on using color shades or intonations or tonations, some colors like blue are considered as one of the safest colors. Reason being, the majority of colorblind people can actually see blue as a color, which I found to be a very interesting statistic, because apparently that's why Facebook has that shade of color. Apparently Zuckerberg is actually colorblind. This I heard about. I do not have any statistics to back that up. But I'm just pointing out, borrow a lot from nature. The military does it, why shouldn't you? Let's talk a bit about modeling for humans as we begin wrapping up this talk about design for simplicity. When you're modeling for human beings, first and foremost, you have to remember that it is human beings who are going to interact with your platform. So do not overcrowd it, keep it simple, ensure you speak your message out to them very quickly, very simply. Why? Because the average person today, their attention span is really brief. Those of you who have already done the pitch, or those of you who are preparing to do a pitch, I have experienced this before. I have seen people go through this. Someone's trying to showcase how their mobile app works to a panel, or maybe a group of farmers. They're standing on a stage and they bring out their mobile phone to try and showcase from the screen of their mobile phone how it works. And who are they showing this to? 200 farmers, 3 judges, 5 judges. And I'm thinking, you're on stage. I can't see the screen. And even if I saw the screen, guess what the person's doing? The few times when they connect their mobile phone to a projector, guess what they're trying to do? They're trying to show me the registration steps. And I'm thinking to myself, you've gotten it wrong. That's a loss of valuable time up there, loss of 5 minutes. Even if you show me the registration steps, I am a farmer. Why would I want to see the registration on the app? All I want to see is how the app helps me solve my problem. And if you want to define my problem, start with a question. Are you having trouble selling your products online? Are you having trouble finding buyers for your maize? Then I'll think to myself, okay, you have my attention. Next step, show me the interfaces on your app. That will solve my problem. What are the interfaces? This is one quick hack. Bring up a couple of interfaces from the app and simply say, when you click on next, this is going to happen. When you click on this, this is going to happen. In between, there could be all sorts of little steps, all sorts of technology, all sorts of artificial intelligence running in the background. I don't need to see that. Why? I am your audience and I am not here to see the artificial intelligence. I'm here to see my problem getting solved, which is why this is one quick hack. Now, many of you will ask, how did I get these interfaces here? That I'm going to show you in the next steps as we get to the end. But underscoring all of this is why imagery is important. Humans understand better what they see. It's just the way we are made. That's why they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Kids will remember a song. Kids will remember a National Geographic video. But if you stand in class and start writing lots of text, there's only a handful of human beings who are intelligent enough to actually handle all that information overload. So how do the pros do it? What kind of tools do we use, or do the pros use to get this information in such a way that your presentation nails the point? Here are a couple of apps that I personally use. I know a couple of other people that use them, but there are so many apps out there. The whole point is pick your poison, work with it. Number one, there's what we call Adobe XD, or otherwise called Adobe Experience Design. One of the best apps out there, in my opinion. Works on a Mac, works on a Windows machine, you name it. This interface that I've been showcasing was actually done in Adobe Experience Design. For the record, a lot of these assets I picked up from what's already available on the internet. So I didn't even need to come up with them myself. I picked them up, reassembled them, renamed a few things up there, and boom, I had the interface done. How long did it take me? Approximately 10, 15 minutes to get it all done. Well, maybe actually closer to 30 minutes, but the whole point is Adobe XD does that for you. It's a prototyping tool. When you want to get your message across to the world and design for simplicity, Adobe XD is a beautiful solution to consider. There is another one called Balsamic. You may have heard of it, but the whole point is Adobe XD is one of them. The second is Photoshop. Well, before I get to Photoshop, Adobe XD is free. Some credit to Adobe for that. Then you have Adobe Photoshop. Many of you have heard about Photoshop. Today, social media keeps talking about that has been Photoshopped and the likes. Well, Photoshop is the tool. This app doesn't exist. I may have mentioned that earlier, but I got this interface and converted it into this. Suddenly, the human mind tells you, oh, this app already exists. So that means you've already made some headway. The app doesn't exist. Photoshop just allows me to do a 3D render of the app. You could use lots of other 3D animation tools to achieve the same results. And I'm sure online there's a service that will allow you to do that. My point is, Photoshop is another tool that you can use to manipulate your interfaces and create an impression, especially if you're trying to address an audience, such as judges, or even management or an institution that you want to fund your innovation. Google Draw, which is free. Adobe Photoshop is not free, unfortunately, but Google Draw, which is free, allows you to do a substantial amount of work. It allows you to do interfaces, it allows you to do process flows, it allows you to do a couple of other brain maps and so many other things, mind maps rather, not brain maps, but it's a beautiful tool. They keep on upgrading it, updating it, and it helps a lot, especially if I need to explain to people that this is the process that we are following. We'll start at point number 1 and eventually go through 2 options. If you go through this one, it's shorter. Finally, we end up at this stage. And that's how the app basically operates. And most people tend to appreciate that because they know I'm basically trying to get the message across very clearly. Finally, there's PowerPoint. Now, there are hundreds of other tools in between, but PowerPoint is, I'm just showcasing about 4 of them. PowerPoint helps me with the presentation, especially in a case like a webinar of this situation or lots of other situations where I have to pitch an app. The reason I'm talking about these tools is because you're going to find yourselves in situations where even if you don't win the competition, at some point you're going to be pitching to management. There's no way you bring up an app when people only have 5 minutes to listen to what you're saying and try and show them how the app works. If I show you from interfaces, just like I had done previously, if I show you from interfaces how the app operates, most people tend to understand that. I have experienced this where I have done that to management. They got the concept very quickly and the contract proceeded, or the engagement process proceeded. Okay, that said, great. I think I have gotten to the end. I didn't even realize. I know I have overshot my time, but I hope this has been beneficial. What we will be talking about in the next days are the other levels. How do we get to the market? How do we scale our products? And even if we don't win the competition, how do we sell what we are doing? How do we come up with an innovation, structure it in such a way that the public embraces it? But underlying all of that, how do we use data that we have collected? I first wanted to get us all onto the right footing so that we all are of the same mind that there are many things we can borrow from. We can change our mind. We can downplay our fears, which definitely exist, but we should also be able to look ahead and say, how shall we get our products to the next level? We don't just want to win. We want to excel. That's basically where we want to go. Great. Thank you very much for being patient with me for the last 1 hour, 15 minutes. I believe there are a couple of questions right now, and I think we can get into them. Nicola, over to you.
Thanks very much, Sam. Thank you for the presentation. We have one question in the Q&A section, and that is, how do we determine what people are willing to pay for? Do we offer the free version first and then test the market from there? So offer different upgrades and see which one people take up.
Wonderful. How do we determine what people are willing to pay for? Sometimes let me start by stating that sometimes we get afraid. Daddy? Just give me a second. I am working from home, so my kid keeps joining me. Sorry about that. And he's still around. He loves to moderate most of my calls. So how do we determine what people are willing to pay for? I had started by pointing out that many a time it's our fear that controls us. And unfortunately for us, when we are afraid to test the waters, many times we will not be able to figure out what people are willing to pay for. You asked, do you offer the free version first and test the market from there? So offer different upgrades and see which one people take up. You have the right of it. There is no mincing words here. Let me actually tell you what happened with Adobe XD, Experience Design. They first offered it as a free version. And while they were testing to see the response of the market, lots of people signed up, began using the app. Then lots of competition also began coming in. Then Adobe turned around and said, great, we're giving you 30 more days to continue using the app. After that, you'll have to pay to use the app. And the response from the market was horrible. People left. People stopped using the app. They moved on to Balsamic, Sketch. That's another thing that's available for Macs. When Adobe realized that the response was worse than they had expected, they turned around and said, let's leave this thing free. That's why I put it up here and I say it's actually free. That was one situation where Adobe tested the waters. They tried a model, it didn't work, and instead they turned around and said, it's probably better that we leave it free because it leaves us competitive within the market, because guess what? Many of the other tools are free. So we can't actually compete by adding a price to ours. Now that is one thing that you could do. First offer the free version, rightly so, test the market, see how people respond, and then come up with a price model. If you're selling your app, it also pays to research. If you want to determine what people are willing to pay for, think of it this way. PayPal has certain levies. If you're going to get into the market and compete with PayPal, you definitely want to have slightly lower than them, unless you have a very solid bulletproof value proposition. The same goes for Uber. I've seen all these apps that have come up, all these ride-sharing solutions in Uganda that have sprung up, and all of them hinge off the Uber model. They have to come up with a pricing that, one, allows them to meet their bare minimum cost or their cost of operations, but at the same time allows them to be reasonably profitable. So in terms of coming up with the appropriate pricing model, there are lots of things you could do, but underlying all of it, I always tell people, don't be afraid to try. Get out there, try, see what the numbers tell you. After all, like the saying goes, numbers don't lie. I hope that answers your question. There are a couple of others that have come up.
Yes.
Nicola, how long should we keep on? I notice we've already burnt into 1 hour, 20 minutes. Can we take questions for another 20 minutes perhaps?
We can, as long as people, it doesn't bother me.
All right, great.
Okay. Next question. In any competition, since I'm still in an idea phase, I always get intimidated by people who have something to show, like an MVP. So if you would advise, what is best to show in a presentation of an idea? Would it be a diagram or a mock-up demonstration?
Okay, this is Makoma. Thanks a lot for that question. Let me give you my opinion on this. Getting intimidated by people who have MVPs, that is absolutely natural. It's absolutely normal. Everybody gets through that. I suffer the same myself. What would be best to present, because your question basically states, what is best to show in a presentation of an idea? Is it a diagram or a mock-up or a demonstration? I can tell you for a fact that all three of those seem to say the same thing. Now, let me show you what I did back here. This is a diagram. This could be a demonstration. I'm using two diagrams. I'm using a couple of animations. Just playing around with the animations, I have highlighted, and everybody now knows that if I click the next button, this is the interface that's going to pop up. I do not have to populate the information in this interface, but I just have to do that and say that. That's one way to do a demonstration. Another time, and I can also point out that that's also a diagram. The point is, you want to get a message across to your audience. So what is your audience asking for? If your audience is asking, do you have the solution ready? You gotta learn to be honest, or what I would call be tactful in the way you say that. You can turn around and say, no, I do not have the product ready, but we are at 30% readiness. Usually that tells people, oh, okay, all right, you've done something. Then I can tell you the direction in which we are going by showing you this particular demonstration. These could be diagrams. This can, using PowerPoint, this can become a demonstration. Other times people say this actually becomes a prototype. Interestingly enough, Adobe XD, as well as many of the prototyping tools, allow you to create a mock-up of a working interface or a working system. So that when I actually click the button on the screen, this interface is going to pop up. But I've found that when I lay things out this way, especially if I'm talking to management, this tends to work better. Mainly because management is asking lots of questions about when will this be ready? I have solved approximately 3 concepts this way, whereby one, a telecom actually bought in. The second, a regulator bought in, because just by using the interfaces or the diagrams, everybody was able to see the direction we'll be going. Then the next question was, how long before it will be ready? It's all about knowing your audience and modeling or presenting to them as human beings and ensure they understand what you're asking about. I hope that answers the question. I think we can go to the next one.
Sure. Okay, I think that this will probably be answered in the next 2 days, but
okay.
The question is there any help or support that you can give to startups that don't win the competition?
That's, I guess I could say that's the purpose for this set of presentations or this set of webinars. Like I pointed out, 90% will not win the competition. But one thing we've learned from history, especially with the advent of Silicon Valley and so many other venture capitalists, we've seen that sometimes applications that don't seem to stand a chance turn out to be successful. Many people still have difficulty understanding how WhatsApp makes money. I'm one of those, for the record. And other people also question how it is that Slack has become a $1 billion company. And yet it didn't seem to be doing anything fundamentally different from Skype. But today it is a force to reckon with. The point is, you may not win a competition, but you could have a viable idea that when presented to the public actually sells. And that is the audience that the innovation or the incubation is meant to help you achieve. Even if you don't make it to the incubation, my hope is that by sharing with you these slides and sharing with you a couple of the experiences I've had and giving you the cheat sheets, it will help you figure out your way or navigate your way through these waters so that you don't have to make the same mistakes I've seen lots of people making. You don't have to, first of all, get yourself fired so that you understand that, by the way, there are lots of ways to achieve the same result. That's the whole purpose. So this is part of the assistance that we are offering, or the mentorship that we are attempting to offer. Okay, I think we can look at the next question.
Sure, thanks. And there's 2 more, so I think we'll take these 2 and then we'll call it a day. The next question, how best can one make a clear statement when approaching 2 types of customers?
Okay, how best can one make a clear statement when approaching two types of customers? It depends on how diverse those customers are. If I'm talking to two customers where one likes water, another one likes flavored water, those two are almost the same type of customer. But if I'm talking to one who likes water, another one loves fizzy drinks, energy drinks, I think those are two very different customers. To make a clear statement, and I assume by making a clear statement, you're talking of a clear marketing statement to these customers. You definitely want to get their attention. There may not be one size fits all. Brace yourself for that. When it comes to marketing, if you're running an ad on Facebook and you want to make a clear statement to get two different types of customers to come to your website, if people notice you're trying to be generic, chances are they probably won't respond to your ad. They won't convert. What you might have to do is run two separate ads to get their attention, each of them. The example I used about a cat owner and a dog owner, if you're selling pet food, and this I'm borrowing from Russell Branson's book, if you're selling pet food, you might have to have a specific message for the cat owners. Why? Because cat owners probably need different types of food, or rather kittens need different type of food from puppies. So at the end of the day, you might have to run two different ads. On the other hand, to understand which of your ads is doing best, because your question has multiple dimensions to it. To understand which of your ads is doing best, you may have to do what they call split testing. This is something I'll talk about in day 3. Split testing is the art of running multiple ads, or what some people call A/B testing. It's the art of running multiple ads, assessing the results from those ads, and then picking out the one that has the highest conversions. Sometimes you'd be so surprised at what happens. People say, change the title. Leave the ad the same, just change the titles and see if the title is what's impacting your conversion rate, or if it's impacting how people are responding to your message. Change the title and see the results. That is what they call split test 1. Then after that, they would say, maybe change the image. You might find that the image gets different people to respond differently. Some people love blue, some people love red, some people love orange. Change the colors and see how people respond. So the whole point is you may have to run multiple simulations or permutations just to see the result. All of this is within a structured environment, and then see the results. And based on that one, you'll basically be able to tell this kind of person responds this way, this other person responds that way. But the better you understand your audience, the better you can very quickly narrow down what their points of interest will be. I hope that helps, James.
Okay, thanks, Sam. So the last question we will take is, in the case of a free application, how does a business make income?
Wow, very interesting question. I think I pointed out that WhatsApp is one of those cases that I am yet to properly understand, because WhatsApp is, for all purposes and intents, free, and many of us don't yet understand how they make income. But I can tell you that there are many schools of thought in this area. Google is, for instance, a free application. When you go to the Google search, it's free. However, it makes money by targeting those who are advertising. So it just tells you that, all right, these are the results based on our algorithm. However, there is this result that has been paid for and it's appearing at the top. Just keep in mind it's an advert. That's one way they make money. So it's technically a free application to us, the users, but to us, the advertisers, it's not a free application. Other apps use things like adverts. They run adverts. Some of the Google actually has a couple of ads that they allow their partners to run. And that is why you find some apps will have an ad popping up every now and then. And that's actually how they make money. In the case of Facebook, when I was reading up about it, and this is based on my limited understanding of, rather not Facebook, WhatsApp, my limited understanding of the way they are structured, it turns out that both Google and Facebook were interested in WhatsApp. And the way WhatsApp became valued was the cost of not owning WhatsApp, the impact it would have on either one of these companies. And Facebook realized that if Google bought WhatsApp, Facebook stood to lose substantially. If Google also realized if Facebook bought WhatsApp, Google would lose substantially. Unless I'm mistaken, probably I think Microsoft might have also been in on the action. The whole issue was Facebook placed such a valuation on WhatsApp, which most of the world is still trying to come to grips with. But that was what determined WhatsApp's value, because it had such phenomenal conversion rate. So what you'd call eyeballs on the system. The user base was incredible. So you have lots of people who are interested in the product. Increasingly, what I've also been learning about within what you call the tech eco space is that there are apps that are more community beneficial or beneficiary to community. They help a lot. And such apps are driven by development or donor partner funding. Or you have some venture capitalists who will simply sink money into them in the knowledge that I am not expecting a return. This app is simply helping lots of people. So if somebody has an app that is helping pharmacists or pharmaceuticals distribute drugs or medicine to people in rural areas, such an app is most likely a loss-making app. It's technically free in the sense that it's not charging for the delivery, but somebody else is paying for that service. And this could be where the development partners come in. The whole point is that there are some of these models that have taken center stage, but for that to work, you really need to spend time and talk to prospective funders and look at your numbers correctly and express to them that you're not actually out to make money. You're out to help the public. It's a social good app, which is meant to help the lives of lots of people. So it becomes technically a free service, but somebody else has to pay for all of that. That's just my 2 cents on that one. So like I said, there's lots of models. There's a WhatsApp model, which is totally free. There's a Google model, which is free to one set of users, costly to another. Zoom at this point also has different models. Their app is generally free, but if you want to have more minutes, like right now we've exceeded 1.5 hours, you definitely need to pay for that kind of account and many other things. I hope this is helpful.
Thanks very much, Sam. I see we have a couple more questions, but I think we've run out of time. We've gone over now. Please feel free to address these to Sam on.
Absolutely.
I think that's everything. Thank you very much, Sam, for this first in the series of 3 and for going through a very comprehensive set of concepts and presentations.
Sure. Thanks a lot, everybody. If you have other questions, please, by all means, reach out to me on Slack. I'm available on the Slack channels. I'll try and respond as quickly as possible. The next time we'll be having a date is Wednesday about the same time. So thanks again, and have yourselves a lovely evening. Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Cheers.